Structure is important, and many people concentrate too much on structure. But in the end, it all comes down to that one thing: your screenplay having a beginning, a middle, and an end. And it's what happens between those 3 points that is so important. So important because it depends on what your characters do from the beginning, through the middle, to the end of your screenplay. There must be a line that runs through it. A line that your reader or viewer can follow. I am Isaac, and this is how to write a screenplay, a step-by-step guide. As I said, structure is important. It helps to keep order in your screenplay. It helps to realize when certain things are supposed to happen. But it's not everything. Just like plot and story, conflict-less resolution is not everything. You need much more. And that starts with a line that runs through from the beginning of your screenplay to the end of your screenplay. And as I've said, that depends on what your characters do in your screenplay. And that, again, depends on your plot, your story, your conflict, and the conflict resolution. But that, again, depends on something else. How your characters act and react to things. How your characters speak. What is important to your characters. That is very important. Your plot and story determines what would happen in your screenplay. But your characters need to give life to it. Your characters is the medium through which you mostly speak to your reader or your viewer. If your reader or your viewer don't understand your character, if they don't understand why your character is doing things, why your character would not do certain things, there's no point to your screenplay. There's no point to your story. Because a story needs a few basic things. But here comes in the problem. A story only comes into existence when there is a conflict that arises. But there's something that many amateurs or beginner writers forget. Before your protagonist is drawn into the conflict, there is another conflict in existence. In Speed, you have a man who was fired from his job because of something he allegedly did, and he lost his pension. But this man had a big problem. He needed his pension to survive. But more than that, he believed his pension was due to him. He had a right to his pension. And that conflict in him, that he was done wrong, and he need to make his former employer let him have his pension. So he made a plan. You see, there was conflict in his life. He needed money to survive, and he had no money. That's why he needed his pension. Conflict does not only touch your protagonist. Your antagonist also have a conflicting situation. Something that makes that antagonist do what he or she does. And that thread that goes from the beginning to the end starts with that conflict. Why your antagonist is doing certain things. Why is your antagonist suddenly going up against your protagonist? You need that information. Maybe not right in the beginning. You can bring it out later in your story. That conflict that drives your antagonist, your reader or viewer need to know. Maybe not in the beginning, but that reason should be given to them at some point. The next stage is that the antagonist go up against the protagonist. Why do we go up against the protagonist? And the main reason for that is because the protagonist stands in his or her way to get what they believe they should get. Or the protagonist is standing in the way of the antagonist to succeed in his or her plan. No matter what that plan is, but it's important for the antagonist to succeed. Now comes in one of the main points. How do you start off your story? And this is very important. The stronger the conflict in your screenplay, the stronger your story will be. The weaker the conflict, the sooner your story will end. And this we can see in many amateur films where things just go round and round and round. People doing the same things, people saying the same things. There's nothing really exciting, nothing really that big that happens at the beginning of the film. The more or the deeper the conflict, the stronger the conflict, the stronger the reason behind that conflict, the more work your antagonist will have to put in, the more work your protagonist will have to put in the end. Weak conflict results in weak solutions. I say again, weak conflict results in weak solutions. And here is the other important thing that should be taken note of. Your character needs to be believable, especially your protagonist. If your protagonist suddenly do something that your reader or viewer cannot believe is possible for that protagonist to do, you have lost your reader or viewer already. Your reader or viewer must know that your protagonist has certain skills to deal with the situation. Or your protagonist must learn certain skills to deal with the situation. Your protagonist, if your protagonist knows everything, can do everything, there's no need for your story because your protagonist can stop it before it happens. And that's why you also need a strong antagonist. Let's go back to Titanic. Why is Cal so upset when Rose chose Jack over him? And that comes in with the type of person Cal is. Cal had this belief that he knew everything, and that woman knows nothing, and that men need to care for women. Now why did it lead to the conflict in Titanic? Why did it lead to Rose's story in Titanic, which was the main story in Titanic, and not the love story between Jack and Rose? It's because Rose also had needs and wants. Rose wanted to make her own decisions. about her life. She did not want to be told, as was the case in Titanic. She grew up in this rich man's life, where women had to know their place, where women had to be dependent on men. And that drove the conflict between Rose and Cal even further, especially when Jack came into the story, because now Rose was touching Cal's manhood. Rose was touching Cal, especially on something that was of utmost importance to him, and that was his stature in the society they lived in, this rich man's society, where every woman had to know her place. And Rose, going up against Cal basically, was showing Cal that he was no real man. And that Cal could not take, because it was cutting deep into who he was, who he believed he was, and his stature in society. Now it brings us to another point. You need to know your characters, who your characters are, what your character believe about themselves, and what they believe about what other people think about them, and what other people would think if certain things happens to them. In Breaking Bad, the protagonist found out that he was ill and dying, but he had a family to care for, and he didn't have money. He had 2 jobs, but he didn't bring in enough money to support his family's lifestyle. And here his illness brought another dimension into his life. So why would a mild-mannered teacher suddenly may start manufacturing drugs? Because of the driving force that was behind him. Bringing me back to my earlier point, your protagonist must have certain skills, knowledge, and expertise to deal with a situation that arises, that threatens him and those around him. In Breaking Bad, the teacher was a science teacher who knew about chemicals. That is why he could start making drugs. If he did not have that background, he would have had to go and learn about making drugs. So you can see, it's not only about your plot, the story, conflict, and conflict resolution. It goes deeper than that. The reason why your character do certain things and why he or she can do it. And that needs to come out in your narrative. That is what makes narrative such an important thing in your story, in your screenplay, in your film. You need to let your reader or viewer know why things are happening, how it is happening, and what your characters are capable of. And that starts happening not at the end, but from the beginning of your story. Introducing your characters to your reader or your viewer. Introducing your plot and your story to your readers or viewers. There starts that line that runs through from the beginning, through the middle, to the end of your story. If that does not happen, you have a problem. If what happens at the beginning is unbelievable, no one will believe what is happening in your screenplay, your story, or your film.